Hello, and welcome to Improbable Things. I'm J. Grace Pennington, and this is my podcast where I share 6 improbable thoughts before breakfast, which for me means 6 thoughts about reading, writing, or just storytelling in some form or fashion. So I managed to get up early and get some 6 things together, and I am ready to share them with all of you. So number 1, my update on Firmament Progenitor, book 10 in the Firmament series. I am in theory supposed to finish the first draft today, and I should easily be able to hit the word count that I'm supposed to, but it might actually be a couple more days before it's finished. And if so, then this, already this is shaping up to be one of the longest first drafts of a Firmament book so far. And not by a ton, but normally I shoot for 50,000 words and don't quite make it. Like I'll be closer to 48 or 49. But in this case, I've been shooting for 50 and assuming it was going to be done a little bit before. And it's just, we're closing in on 50,000 and there's still a little bit of stuff to go. Like I was sort of stopped in the middle of the big climactic showdown yesterday. But once I finished that, there's still like another chapter to sort of, wind things down, get that denouement in there, just resolve everything. So it could very well go over 50,000, and it's okay if it takes a couple more days to get finished. That's no big deal. Like I've said many times, I intentionally do not give myself hard and fast deadlines. But either way, it's almost done. And we'll see how it looks once I go back to it. I kind of have mixed feelings about it right now. I feel like the writing honestly has gone smoothly. And I think the bones of the story are very good. The general plot, I think, is good. But I just have some doubts about, I don't know, just some of the pacing of the story, some of the characters and the way that they're expressing themselves. I don't know. I just have a few doubts, but I can never tell for sure any of those things when I'm in the process of writing a first draft. So we'll see. But in the meantime, I am grateful that it really has gone pretty smoothly, like one of my more smooth first drafts, I would say. And I'm glad to be almost done and almost on to the next phase. So number 2, since I am getting into March pretty soon here, and I know I've mentioned I try to sort of rethink and reassess my goals each month. So kind of my plans for March, I'm going to get Progenitor right out to my beta readers. I realized too I need to get my cover artist going on the cover. And then I'm kind of going to take like a small break. Not totally. I'm going to get out a few Vella episodes, probably each week, but I definitely need just a little break in between because I have been having a huge word count daily and getting out a lot of Vella episodes, and that's all been fine, but I'm definitely ready for just like a week or so where I just like I'm a little bit more chill in the afternoons, because the afternoons is when I write. And some afternoons I'm really tired, and so I might like take a few naps and just like do a little more reading or just slow down a little bit in the afternoons for like I said, a week or so. But then on the second half of the month, I am hoping to get to work on actually editing this one. We'll see how quickly my beta readers can get to it. I always try not to give any of my people hard and fast deadlines either. I don't want anybody stressing over this. So we'll just see how it goes. But in theory, what I would love to do is get it read in those first couple weeks and then get started on the editing process the second half of the month, so I can hopefully get it up on Vella in April, possibly get it released in May. But we'll see how all of that goes. And either way, I'm going to be grateful for just a little mostly break for a little bit here. Number 3, on that line, I may start working on the next book in the series as soon as I get this one off to my editor. But like I mentioned, I need that little break, but also I want to spread it out a little more this next time. So I think I've mentioned I basically took 2 months to write this one, which is good and great, but the way I did it was the first month, so in January, I just wrote a little each day, and sometimes that was literally a few hundred words or less. And then the second month, because I really wanted to get it finished, I had to have much more strenuous word counts, and some days I was writing well over 2,000 words a day. Plus there were a few days in the month where I didn't do it, like when I was on vacation, and plus I don't write on Sundays, so I had to write a lot this month, and I would like to just spread that around a little bit more next time, because I realized if I take a couple months to do it and write more consistently over those 2 months, and if I'm not writing on Sundays and maybe have another day or two during the month that writing doesn't happen, that's still really only going to be like 1,000 words a day, which is going to be a lot easier than the way I did it this time. So I think I'm going to try that next time and see how it works. I'm pleased with how this went, but I'm still trying to sort of perfect the system for cranking these things out. And you'd think after 10 plus years I would have it down, but for one thing, the way you write changes, but much more than that, just life keeps changing. So I keep having to adapt, which is fine and which is good for you. So that's fine. But and honestly, if I'm just gonna be 100% like open with you, I don't actually remember what the next book even is. Like I have kind of the general arc for the series in my mind, and I have all the synopses written down, but I do not remember which synopsis comes after this one. So I'm gonna have to check my master list and see about that one. But I am excited for where the series is going. I feel like a lot of things have really come together with this book finally, and we've just, gone past the halfway point, so that's good timing, I guess. But yeah, some questions are going to be answered, some characters going to be added, and I think it's all going to be really good stuff, but we'll see what my readers think. Number 4, I know I've talked quite a bit about my oldest learning to read, and that's continuing to go really well. But a lot of times, she'll be reading and she needs my help with like a bigger word or something, maybe a rule of phonics that she hasn't learned yet, which there are plenty of because English is crazy. But anyway, so that's my 5-year-old Violet. And then April, who is 4, came out from her rest time while I was writing the other day, and hands me this little board book she has that's open to one particular page. And I said, what do you need? Why are you out here at nap time? And she just goes, Mommy, I can't quite read this part, and points to the page. And I just looked at her and I went, Baby, you can't read at all. Like, what are you talking about? But it was so funny because she was, I don't know, I never know what's going on in her head, but she apparently, I guess, I don't know if it was because she'd been trying to read it and just either making it up or remembering parts that I'd read to them before, and then just got to one page that stumped her version of reading. I don't know, but it was really cute. And she's very anxious to begin reading and knows all her letter sounds. So I told her that once her big sister is finished with the 100 Easy Lessons reading book, then we can start it with her and see how that goes. But it was so funny, and she didn't, like, it wasn't long ago that she had no interest in reading or really any schoolwork at all. And so to see that kind of start to blossom recently has been so much fun. And yeah, I absolutely love getting to watch this process of learning and discovery with them. It's so much fun. So number 5, for my currently reading, I am reading Amusing Ourselves to Death by Neil Postman. And this is one that I've actually been intending to read for many, many years. I've heard so many people recommend it very highly, and a lot of people in various methods and walks of life that I respect have very highly recommended it. But, for one thing, there's just a lot of books to read. And then for another, I had tried a couple times, sort of like half-heartedly, to find a copy, but my local library didn't have it. And I wasn't able to find, I don't like to spend a lot of money on books, especially if I haven't read them and I'm not sure yet how much I like them. And I couldn't find like a really affordable copy, for my standards. So I was kind of waiting, and then I had started going to a library in the next town for a few things, and I thought, oh, like I'm going to be going there to return some stuff. I should just check if they have this one there, and they did. So I grabbed it and I've been reading it, and I've really been like, actually, I know I talked last week about, trying to read a little more slowly, and I've been doing that with this one, not even really on purpose. It's just kind of forcing me. I'm only reading a chapter a day, and then I really can't read more. Like I have to process that chapter for a little while. It's just very thought-provoking, very interesting. Basically, the book was written in 1985, and he was talking about the way the advent of television in particular, and then the progression of information technology in general, even back then, was changing culture, changing the way that people think, changing basically everything about the way that we view life and just so many things. And what's really interesting about reading it now, more than 30 years later, is that it's rather than becoming less relevant, it's actually so much more relevant with the continuation of this sort of fast, image-based, like instant gratification, like all that kind of thing is just so much increased with social media and everything that we have now, much more than it was with television. But all the same things are still true. And you can really see some of the things he was talking about having come to fruition or having progressed even more. So it's just been really interesting, really good thoughts, and really obviously we all know that, parents talk about and people talk about how, lots of screen time is not good and reading is better for your brain and things like that. But just the ins and outs of why, all the reasons that is, and the much more so the more massive impact that it has on our whole world and our culture. Just super thought-provoking. So I'm not finished yet, but I already highly recommend it. And again, obviously some of the references are dated, like his cultural references and technological references, those are dated, but the ideas are so, like I said, just so relevant and so applicable to everything going on today. Like it's kind of scary. So yeah, Amusing Ourselves to Death. Should finish it in the next few days and definitely recommend that one. So number 6, while my husband and I were out of town for our anniversary, we went to see a movie, and the movie that we saw was Argylle, which some of my friends had seen and had really enjoyed, so I was really looking forward to it. He didn't really know anything going into it. So we went in, we watched it, we walked out, and he said that was one of the top 5 worst movies I have ever seen. And I was shocked because it definitely was not one of my top 5 best or anything. Like, I'm not saying this is the greatest movie of all time, but I had really enjoyed it. And so that put a little bit of a damper on the evening because also he's a sort of verbal processor and likes to talk, about his thoughts, which is great. But he liked to talk a lot about why this movie was bad. And at a certain point, I was like, okay, well, I actually did like it though, so that's also fine. But anyway, it was just very interesting to me because a lot of people I've talked to have really also not liked it. And then the movie review podcast that I listened to, they hated it and used some very strong language as to how bad it was. And I was just interested in that because, again, I definitely agree that it was not the greatest movie ever. Like, it was silly, it was campy, but it was just fun. And sometimes I'm like, I just want to watch a movie and like have fun watching it. And it was really fun to watch, in my opinion. So I kind of got me thinking about, obviously different people have different tastes and that's all fine. But I think there was something more than that going on here, at least for a lot of the people I've talked to that have seen it. And that is people having different thresholds for suspension of disbelief. So basically, any fictional movie or fictional story at all, you have to suspend your disbelief to a certain degree because you're believing that these actors on the screen are these people, or that this thing that is not really happening is happening, or whatever. So there's always some degree of that. And then the further you get from the way reality works, the more you have to suspend your disbelief. And so, you're watching a fantasy or sci-fi movie, then you're having to accept that, okay, this is the way magic works in this world, or this is the fact that they can go to space or travel through a Stargate, or that there's robots that, whatever. So that adds an additional element that you're having to suspend disbelief from reality for the duration of the story. But there's degrees of that even in sci-fi and fantasy, where there's a certain extent where you can look and you can say, okay, obviously we don't have magic in the real world, but in the inner workings of this particular world, it feels consistent. And so I will accept that there's magic, and then I can accept the story. And that's you suspending your disbelief in magic for the duration of this story so that you can properly experience it. But there's a certain point where it will hit, just this place where it tips over into becoming too much, and the story no longer will function for you on that level. And that is just not the same for everyone. And obviously there's a lot of different things that go into different people's tastes, but I think a lot of times this can be a big one, like I said, especially for fiction. So I think that was a huge, just from having listened to my husband and having listened to this podcast, I think that was a huge element in Argylle, where it's not fantasy or sci-fi, but it is this sort of, like I said, really campy spy, action thriller. And so there's things going on that you have to accept that are not part of your everyday life. And in this case, a lot of things that are really not realistic. That, I'm not going to get into too much or spoilers or anything, but there's just like the fact that people would react this way, or would be able to do this or that, or that this would actually happen. Like, you're having to accept a lot of these things that are definitely, I will agree, not realistic. But several people have described to me a certain point in the movie where they just kind of went, okay, no, this is too far. And while I actually enjoyed that part in the movie and just thought it was a lot of fun, but I have had that experience with some other films. Like, especially, I know my husband and I were watching the movie Hobbs and Shaw, and we both hit that at the exact same moment. There was one moment where we were watching and we both were just like, okay, no. Like, this is just ridiculous. And we couldn't enjoy the movie anymore because it had just gotten too far over into that unreality for us personally. And so I guess there's a point in this movie, and probably different points for different people, where they just were not able to accept the premise anymore. And so that was just kind of interesting to me. And it was a reminder to me that you really cannot please everyone. And it is important to know your target audience. I've heard a lot of people criticize that about the movie, that perhaps they didn't really know their audience and didn't really know who they were making it for. And be that as it may, it is important to know your audience and what they will accept. Like, my biggest example always is my husband and I watched the movie Speed a while back. And I was really enjoying it almost the whole time. And it was like super intense and exciting and all that. And then there's this one part very kind of near the end where they're coming to like the buses driving along and they can't stop and all this. And there's this bridge that is broken. And so the driver is freaking out, like, how are we going to get across this bridge? And the guy is telling her, like, you just have to go like fast and we can make it. And so she drives toward, like, really fast toward the break in the bridge. And then when the bus reaches this gap, it just sort of goes up and over onto the other side. And as soon as I saw that, I just checked out from the whole movie. I was just like, this is stupid. that is so like there's nothing that's not how physics works. There was no reason for the bus to like leave the ground and go up and over to the other side. Like that just did not make any sense at all to my brain, and so I could not enjoy the rest of the movie because I'm no longer accepting that this is actually happening. So anyway, that's just but you know, I mean, that's a really famous movie, so I guess it worked for some people. But because of that moment, it ruined the whole movie for me. Like I don't even think of it like as like, even though I enjoyed the whole rest of the movie, I don't think of it as good like anymore. So you just have to be aware of that as a writer. And I just find it interesting, and it's something to keep in mind when discussing stories with other people. Just to remember again that we're all different, and it's always hard to sort out when something is, you know, this is just not well done, and when it is a preference issue. But regardless, we do all have different levels of what we will accept in a story, and you need to be aware of kind of what that line is going to be for your particular audience when you are writing something. Thank you all so much for listening. I'm glad that I was able to get up and be with you this morning. Hopefully you've enjoyed some of my rambling thoughts on these issues. Please let me know if you've read Amusing Ourselves to Death, and if you have any thoughts about it. I would really love to discuss that because, like I said, it's so thought-provoking and so interesting. And then if you've seen Argylle, what you think, if it felt fun or just utterly unrealistic, and if you have any examples of those moments in stories where something has just crossed over into being too unbelievable for your enjoyment, let me know, and let's discuss all of that. And as always, I hope that everyone has a great day and a great weekend ahead, and stay improbable. Bye!